ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaste, my dear friends. This is my fifth video on the life and teachings of Swami Brahmananda, a direct disciple of Paramahansa Ramakrishna. So I start the fifth video. Sri Ramakrishna himself often rebuked his most intimate disciples, and Maharaj also used this method to train those who were near and dear to him. The chastening of a disciple never began, however, until after he had enjoyed several years of love and kind words. These experiences were painful at the time, but they were later treasured among the disciples' sweetest memories. It often happened that even while the disciple was being reproached by Maharaj, he would feel a strange undercurrent of joy. The indifference of Maharaj was the only thing we could not have borne. But Maharaj was never indifferent. The harsher his words, the more intensely we felt his interest in our welfare. The very fact that he could speak to us in this way proved that we were his children, his own. Sometimes a disciple would be reproved for quite insignificant reasons or on grounds that seemed to him utterly unjust. But as time passed, he would realize that there had been certain tendencies and karmas stored in his subconscious mind, and that Maharaj had seen them and was working to annihilate them before they could appear and become harmful. Thus, at the cost of a little unpleasantness, the disciple would be spared years of painful struggle and self-discipline. There was only one occasion when I felt that I had perhaps lost my master's love, and because I could not endure the thought, that very night I decided to run away from the monastery and hide myself forever. Thus resolved, I went next morning to prostrate before Maharaj and solemnly take my leave of him. I was about to go when he told me to sit down. For a while he continued to scold me, reminding me of all my faults. Then with a sudden change of manner and great correctness, he asked, "Do you think you can run away from me?" The mother holds the child on her lap and spanks him, and the child cries, "Mother, mother." Never before had I been so deeply aware of his love and protection. All thought of running away was forgotten. His words soothed my burning heart. Then he said, "Our love is so deep that we do not let you know how much we love you." The truth of this statement was proved to me as I watched how Maharaj dealt with Hariharnanda, another disciple who had been for many years his personal attendant. Hariharnanda had begun to depend too much upon the master. He needed to learn to stand on his own feet, so with a show of displeasure, Maharaj sent him away to practice austerities in the solitude of a temple in southern India. Some years later, Maharaj was in Madras and arranged for Hariharnanda to visit him. I was alone with Maharaj throughout the entire evening on which he was to arrive. Watching Maharaj, I saw that he was as restless as a loving mother who was expecting her son after a long absence. In due time, Hariharnanda arrived, but fearing that Maharaj was still angry with him, he felt shy and wanted to postponed their meeting until the morning. Knowing the real state of affairs, I insisted that he should see Maharaj at once. However, when Hari Harnanda came into the room, Maharaj no longer showed any sign of his loving anxiety. He merely greeted his disciple quietly and asked if he had been keeping well. On another occasion, while I was being reproved in the presence of Ramlal Dada, the nephew of Sri Ramakrishna, another young disciple entered the room. Maharaj turned to him and said jokingly, "With those glasses on, you look like Keshav Sen." The disciple did not answer, for he saw that I was being scolded. Then Ramlal Dada turned to him and said, "Do you know why Maharaj is rebuking this boy in your presence? There is a saying that the mother scolds her daughter in order to teach the daughter-in-law. I remember the first time Maharaj ever reproved me. I had failed to do a certain errand for him because I had not understood exactly what it was he wanted. For this neglect, he scolded me throughout the afternoon. At supper time, Swami Turiyananda was seated with Maharaj and I was fanning them. The scolding continued. I remained silent. Swami Turiyananda turned to me and asked, "Do you know why Maharaj is so hard on you?" "No," I replied. "Frankly, I don't see how I am to blame." Then Swami Turiyananda said, "There are three classes of disciples. The third class disciple merely does the Guru's bidding. The second class disciple does not have to be told. He acts as soon as the thought arises in the Guru's mind. But the first class disciple acts even before the Guru has had time to think." Maharaj wants you all to become first class disciple. To this Maharaj added simply, "You see, brother Hari, I am getting old. They do not obey me anymore. Please knock a little sense into their heads." There was another time when I did not write to Maharaj because my vanity had been wounded. When he came to Madras from Bangalore and asked me why I had not written, I answered carelessly, "Oh, you got all news of me from Swami Shivananda." At a glance, he understood my mood and asked sarcastically, "I suppose you have the key to the treasure house inside you and don't need me anymore." My ill humor vanished immediately. "How can you say that?" I exclaimed. "You know that you hold the key. There is a saying that in order to get honey from a honeycomb, you must poke it. Maharaj once told me how Sri Ramakrishna by his mere touch removed the spiritual obstacles that stood in his disciples' path. To this I answered, "Yes, Sri Ramakrishna did all that for you, but when our turn comes, you can only scold us." Maharaj shook his head and said with great sweetness, "No, my boy, you have no need to worry." Then he repeated 3 times, "I can see how Sri Ramakrishna is doing everything for you." After this, he began to speak of high spiritual matters. Swami Shivananda and many other monks of the order were present. He continued to talk in this way for 3 hours, stopping only when he was told that a householder devotee wanted to see him. He remarked, "Now I cannot continue. My mind has come down to a lower level." Later, Swami Shivananda said to me, "Today I learned many things I had not known before, just because you poked the honeycomb of Maharaj." Sometimes the harsh behavior of Maharaj toward a disciple amounted to apparent cruelty. 3 of us were to be initiated into the monastic order at the same time. One was a boy who had been greatly praised because he had steadfastly practiced spiritual disciplines. We had all noticed his growth, just as the formal rites were about to begin, Maharaj suddenly turned to this boy and said, "Why are you here? I shall not initiate you. Go away." My brother disciple and I were both shocked and felt that Maharaj had been cruel, but the boy himself later admitted that the praise he had received. Suddenly he came over and whispered into my ear, "It makes me feel so bad having to leave you. I shall miss you very much." Later, at the end of a letter, he repeated those same loving words, "I miss you very much." M once told Vishwananda, a disciple of Maharaj, "Observe how Maharaj acts and you will have some idea of what Sri Ramakrishna was like when his mind came down to the finite plane. His sense of humor was very keen. This was also true of Maharaj. One of his favorite jokes was to have some fruits or sweets placed beside a disciple who was meditating. When the disciple had finished his meditation, he would find his favorite dishes laid out before him. Later, Maharaj would ask, "Well, did you get the fruits of your austerities?" Often he would make us all roar with laughter. I remember once, while we were laughing, he nudged me and said, pointing to Vishwananda, "Look, he giggles like a girl." Maharaj would sometimes remark, "It is good to laugh every day. It relaxes the body and the mind." The following stories will give a glimpse of Maharaj's sense of fun and also of the deep love he bore towards his brother disciples. One story is told by Swami Satprakashananda. One afternoon, Maharaj was seated on the large bench on the ground floor veranda of the mutt building facing the Ganges. The old mutt building provided the only residential quarters of the Belur monastery at the time. I was standing very close to Maharaj. Presently, a young man who had come to the monastery to spend a vacation in the company of a holy man approached Maharaj to take leave of him. His holiday was over and he was about to return to his own home. Maharaj had noticed that during his stay, the young man had been particularly devoted to Swami Premananda, who was the center of attraction to many ardent visitors in those days. With his characteristic sense of humor, Maharaj took the opportunity to have a little fun at the expense of his brother disciple Swami Premananda. "Have you taken leave of Swami Premananda?" he asked as the young man bowed down before him. "No, Maharaj, not yet," he replied. "I am going to take leave of him now." "Well, when you bow down to him, you should say that pranama mantra, salutation mantra. Perhaps you do not know this mantra, but I shall teach you." So saying, Maharaj began to recite a Bengali couplet which he quote, probably improvised as he went along, freely translated. It ran sometime like this: "My mind is reluctant to go back home. It is my heart's desire to lie down forever at those blessed feet." Then Maharaj instructed him how to act while saying the mantra. He told him to first stand before Swami Premananda with hands folded in great veneration and repeat the couplet until he came to the line to lie down forever at those blessed feet. When he was to direct his still folded hands towards the Swami's feet and then dive down. The young man turned to go, and as he left, Maharaj told me to go and watch. I followed the youth and saw him standing before Swami Premananda with folded hands as Maharaj had instructed him. But he was silent. However, as he bowed down, the Swami noticed that he was numbling something and asked, "What is this? What are you saying? Speak out, my boy." But the boy remained silent, and then I laughed. Hearing me laugh, Swami Premananda turned to me and said, "Oh, you know what he is saying. Surely, please tell me." And then I told him the whole story of the Pranama mantra, and when I had finished, there was a roar of laughter. The other story tells of an affectionate trick Maharaj played on his brother disciple Swami Akhandananda. The Swami had been staying with Maharaj for some considerable time. When he decided he would like to return to his own ashram, Maharaj begged him to stay a little while longer, but the Swami persisted. Seeing his evident determination to go, Maharaj engaged a palanquin, a portable chair, to take the Swami to the railway station, which was several miles away. The train was due in the early morning, which meant that the Swami had to leave late at night. Before the bearers set out with Swami Akhandananda, Maharaj whispered something to them. It was dark when they left, so the Swami settled down behind the curtains of the palanquin. Every once in a while, the bearers would stop, and the Swami would anxiously inquire what they were stopping for. Each time they assured him that they were stopping merely to rest and to have a smoke, but that there was no need for anxiety. He would arrive at his destination in plenty of time. After several hours of arduous travel, the bearers finally stopped for the last time and asked Swami Akhandananda to alight. Just as he was about to get out of the palanquin, he saw Maharaj standing before him, greeting him as though he had just arrived after a long absence. When the Swami realized that he had been carried around the compound all night, he roared with laughter. Maharaj embraced him, and they both laughed like two children. The relationship between Guru and disciple, according to the Hindu scriptures, is very sacred. Very sacred one. Maharaj used to say that an enlightened soul must help his disciple until he also becomes enlightened. This he cannot be broken by the death of the body. After the teacher has passed away, he still continues to watch over his disciples in spirit. He will not accept his own final liberation until all are liberated. Maharaj was the embodiment of the protection power of the Guru. At one time he was walking with another disciple and myself. He was slightly ahead of us. Suddenly we heard a shout, "Out of the way, there is a mad bull!" An instant later we saw the bull itself rushing towards us. There was no time to run. My brother disciple and I tried to get in front of Maharaj to protect him, but he raised his arms and pushed us back. Although he was now an elderly man, he was still extraordinarily strong. As the bull approached with lowered head, there was a moment's pause. Maharaj stood still, confronting it. Then the bull stopped, shook its head from side to side, lifted it and walked quietly away. Swami Akhandananda relates a similar incident which took place at Bhubaneswar. Maharaj had gone for an evening walk in the woods with Akhandananda and another devotee. By the time they turned homeward, it was dark. All at once they saw a tiger coming towards them. Maharaj stood still. The tiger also stopped about 100 feet away and looked at them for some moments. Then it turned and ran off. Neither of the devotees felt frightened. There could never be any fear in the presence of Maharaj. Maharaj prescribed various disciplines and diverse forms of worship to suit the different temperaments of his disciples. He knew our needs far better than we did. When I first joined the order, I was inclined toward the path of devotion, but Maharaj decided to send me to a monastery in the Himalayas where the ideal of non-dualism is practiced and no ritual is allowed. Before I left, he made me read aloud to him a book on extreme non-dualism. 2 years later, he sent me to the monastery in Madras where ritual is regarded as very important. By this time, I had lost all my devotional inclination and no longer believed in ritualistic worship. Sometime later, Maharaj came to visit this monastery. One day, a devotee brought a large basket of Nagalingam flowers to be offered in the worship. Knowing that they were the favorite flowers of Maharaj, I arranged them in his room. Maharaj came in, saw what I was doing and asked, "Have you saved some of those flowers for the worship of the Lord?" "No, Maharaj," I replied, for I had thought to myself, "After all, the Lord in the shrine room is only a picture, but the Guru is the living God." Maharaj, as usual, read my thoughts and asked, "Do you think it is merely a picture that is worshipped in the shrine?" "Yes," I replied somewhat nervously. "Have you ever performed the ritualistic worship?" "No, Maharaj." "Why not?" "I am not yet a Swami and I am not a Brahman in caste, so I am not allowed to do the external worship in the shrine." Maharaj became quite excited. "What is all this?" he exclaimed. "Call Sarvananda." Swami Sarvananda was a disciple of Maharaj and the head of the Madras monastery. When he appeared, Maharaj asked him, "How is it that a brahmachari of this order is not allowed to do the worship just because he is not a Brahmin?" Sarvananda answered, "Swami Ramakrishnananda was the first head of this monastery. He was very particular that the worship should be performed only by a Swami or a Brahmin. It should not be that way." Maharaj replied, "Anyone who has been initiated and who has entered the order is purified in his body and birth. Therefore, he should be allowed to do the worship." Then turning to me, he said, "You will do the worship." "But Maharaj," I replied, "I do not believe in ritualistic worship. I do not see the living presence in the picture. I am asking you to do the worship now." Maharaj said quietly, "Will you?" I obediently followed his instructions and within a few days became convinced of the great efficacy of external worship. Almost his last advice to me was, "Be ritualistic," and he added, "Look at Ambikananda, one of his senior disciples. See how wonderfully he is progressing through the practice of ritualism." This does not mean, however, that Maharaj asked everybody to practice ritualism. In fact, there are many of his disciples who have never learned the rites of formal worship. Hinduism teaches the value of ritual but does not say that it is essential to everyone's spiritual progress. In conclusion, I must mention two quotations which Maharaj never tired of repeating to his disciples. The first was, "Tell the truth, but never a harsh truth." The second was from the teachings of Sri Chaitanya, be humbler than a blade of grass, be patient and forbearing like the tree, give honor to all, take no honor to thyself. Chant the name of the Lord unceasingly. Maharaj once told me, there are times when it becomes impossible for me to teach anyone. No matter where I look, I see only God wearing many masks. Who am I, the teacher, who is to be taught? But when my mind comes down again to a lower level, I see the ignorance in man and I try to remove it. Maharaj spent most of his later life in a state of high spiritual consciousness, coming down only in order to teach and help us. His awareness of God had become so habitual that he would experience mystical visions even while conscious of the external world around him. He rarely spoke of these visions, and when he did so, it was only to his brothers, swamis or disciples. I shall record a few of them in this chapter. It was the great It was the year 1901, a few days before the annual worship of Durga, God the Mother in her aspect as protectress of the universe. Maharaj was sitting on the bank of the Ganges at the Belur Mutt. Suddenly he saw a Mother Durga walking on the surface of the Ganges toward the monastery grounds. She passed under the sacred Vilva tree in the monastery garden and then disappeared. A moment later, Swami, arrived by boat, came to Maharaj and said, Raja, make arrangements at once for the worship of Mother Durga. Then he told Maharaj that he had a vision and had seen Mother Durga being worshipped at the monastery. Maharaj in turn described his own vision to Swamiji and they began at once to prepare for the worship. Since that day, the special worship of Mother Durga has been held every year at the Belur monastery. Maharaj also performed this worship at the monasteries in Kankhal, Banaras and Madras. He once told Akhilananda that he performed this worship in obedience to the mother's direct command. Akhilananda records that during the Durga festival in Madras, the power of Maharaj was especially felt by his disciples and their minds were raised to higher level of spirituality. Maharaj used to observe Christmas every year by offering special worship to Jesus. The story of the Nativity was read aloud from the Bible and followed by meditation. Fruit, bread, cake and wine were offered in the worship. Sister Dev Mata, an American devotee who happened to be present on one such occasion, records the scene as follows. When I had finished reading, the intense stillness in the air led me to look towards Swami Brahmananda. His eyes were open and fixed on the altar. There was a smile on his lips, but it was evident that his consciousness had gone to a higher plane. No one moved or spoke. At the end of 20 minutes or more, the look of immediate seeing returned to his eyes and he motioned to us to continue the service. After the service, as Maharaj was partaking of the sacramental food, he remarked to Sister Devmata, while you were reading, Christ suddenly stood before the altar dressed in a long blue cloak. He talked to me for some time. It was a very blessed moment. There is a saying in Sanskrit, places of pilgrimage are made holy by the visits of the seers of God. The enlightened The enlightened soul does not need to visit holy places or temples, for he has realized the living God everywhere. Wherever he lives, that place becomes holy. Nevertheless, we know that enlightened men often journey to shrines and temples. They do so because they find there a great manifestation of God, a more concentrated revelation, as it were. This spiritual concentration has been caused by the visits of many holy men and women and by the devotion of pilgrims throughout the ages. When a saint goes to a holy place, he contributes his own revelation to the spiritual treasure house for the benefit of the generations that will follow. The temples of India are dedicated to deities of many forms and aspects, as well as to the impersonal, formless Godhead. This one Godhead, whose name is silence, comprises all divine forms and aspects, yet is beyond form and definition. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, never set a limit to the infinite by trying to define it, and indeed it is evident that infinite God must have infinite forms of expression. Truth is one, sages call it by various names, says the Rig Veda, the ancient scripture of the Hindus. In an orchestra, different instruments play different notes, but when these notes are harmonized, the combined effect is of one beautiful unity. Maharaj reached this unity through his realization of Brahma. An ordinary mystic may be aware of only one instrument and hear only one note, one part or aspect of the divine whole. The illumined soul, however, hears all the instruments, the entire orchestra. Thus it was that Maharaj, while ever conscious of the one Brahma, was able to see the many divine aspects when he visited the temples dedicated to them. At Madura in southern India, there is a famous temple of Divine Mother. When Maharaj entered it and stood before the deity, he exclaimed, Mother, Mother, and lost his external consciousness. Swami Krishnananda, who was with him, saw his condition and held him by the arm to prevent him from falling. Seeing Maharaj standing unconscious in ecstasy, the priest and devotees who were present gazed at him in silence. An intense stillness pervaded the temple and lasted for more than an hour. When Maharaj regained his normal consciousness, he went silently away. Later he described his vision of the humorous form of Divine Mother at the temple of Rameswar, which is dedicated to Shiva, the formless aspect of God. Maharaj was again absorbed in Samadhi. Even after he returned to normal consciousness, he remained for some time in a state of ecstatic joy. The temple at Cape Kumarin is dedicated to Divine Mother in the form of a little girl. Maharaj lived there for several days. For a while he would stand silent and motionless before the deity. Then he would become ecstatic and began to talk to her. Whenever he entered this temple, he lost all external consciousness. In the temple of Vishnu at Tirupati in southern India, Maharaj had a strange experience. The vision he beheld, there was not of Vishnu but of Divine Mother. On inquiry, it was found that the temple had once been dedicated to Mother and later had been changed into a Vishnu temple through the influence of Ramanuja. In the temple of Jagannath at Puri, there are three images. Sri Krishna stands on one side, his brother Balram on the other, and Subhadra, his sister, stands in the center. Here Maharaj once saw the living Krishna on the altar. The three images had disappeared. Maharaj visited this temple many times, and each time he went there, he seemed to dwell in another realm, and his face shone with a radiant smile. Of the many places of pilgrimage that Maharaj visited, he loved Vrindavan and Banaras most of all. He used to tell us that in these two cities a spiritual current is always flowing, and that this current grows particularly strong at certain times of the day and night. He said that if a man meditates and practices Japam in Vrindavan at midnight, he is greatly helped by the spiritual current, and if he meditates in Banaras at 4 a.m., he may easily become absorbed into the higher consciousness. In later years, when Maharaj visited the temples at Vrindavan and Banaras, he would ask his disciples to sing and chant. He himself would pass into ecstasy. Speaking of Banaras, he said, many have found enlightenment there. If the aspirant struggles a little to reach the union with God, he may get it very easily. Only once did Maharaj initiate a disciple in Banaras. After that, he refused to do so because, as he said, Lord Shiva gives liberation to all those who live and die there. The disciple who later became Swami Akhilananda was once in Banaras with Maharaj and wanted initiation. Holy Mother does not initiate any disciple in Banaras. Maharaj told him, I have made the same rule. Then in a sweet, affectionate voice he added, I will initiate you when I go back to the monastery at Belur. Don't be impatient. In my mind, I have already accepted you as my disciple and have made myself responsible for you. Once during the celebration of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday at Belur, while the disciples were singing and chanting, Maharaj went into Samadhi. He was carried to his room completely unconscious of the outer world, his face shining with a heavenly radiance. He remained in this condition so long that his brother disciples became anxious. They told Holy Mother, who was present at the time, but she showed no anxiety. Indeed, she seemed well pleased and said, do not worry about him. Then she went to Maharaj, touched his arm lightly and said in an affectionate voice, Rakhal, I have brought sacramental food for you. Eat, my child. Maharaj immediately returned to normal consciousness and, seeing Holy Mother, prostrated himself at her feet. He used to say, it is very hard to understand Mother's greatness unless she herself reveals it. Through the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, one may recognize the Divine Mother in her. Once while Maharaj was visiting Holy Mother, a female disciple of Sri Ramakrishna said to him, Rakhal, Mother wanted to know from you why a spiritual aspirant must worship the Divine Mother first. Maharaj answered, Mother has the key to knowledge of Brahma. Unless she shows his grace and opens the door, no one can enter into the realm of Brahma. As he left the house where Holy Mother was staying, Maharaj began to sing and dance, clapping his hands like a little boy. Whenever he was with Holy Mother, he always acted in this childlike manner, which expressed the relationship between them. Vijayananda A disciple of Sri Ramakrishna said of Maharaj and his visions, the gods and goddesses are not myths, they are real. They are the many aspects of the one Godhead. I know this because Maharaj used to see and talk to them. Once Akhilananda, who was then a very young boy, was told by Swami Vijayananda to say to Maharaj when he met him, there is something within me that needs awakening. Please give me your help. Akhilananda repeated these words to Maharaj, who replied, why don't you ask Vijayananda to do this awakening for you? Akhilananda answered that he had, but that Swami Vijayananda had said, I have very little spiritual power within me, but Maharaj lives in the powerhouse. He can easily do what you ask. Maharaj looked very serious and said, yes, the awakening will come. Don't be impatient for this awakening. One needs initiation. Then please initiate me. That will be done. Maharaj promised. To quote Akhilananda's own words, Maharaj made us feel that spiritual awakening and God realization are not difficult to achieve. He made us understand that if only we will struggle a little, tremendous help will be given us and that we shall easily reach the goal. In his later years, Maharaj had the vision of Sri Ramakrishna. Every day he used to tell me, I see Sri Ramakrishna every day, and talk to him. To another disciple, he said, I see Sri Ramakrishna whenever he chooses to reveal himself to me. By his grace, you also will see him and talk to him. Although Maharaj lived almost continuously in a high state of consciousness, he was very natural and human in his behavior. Even when he was quite a young man, Sri Ramakrishna said of him, Rakal is like the kind of mango which still looks green outside when it is ripe and sweet within. And this was true throughout his life. Whenever he could, he would hide his ecstatic mood and act in the most normal way. I have already mentioned his keen sense of humor. Balram's wife once dreamed that she was feeding Maharaj. Taking this for an omen, she invited him to a sumptuous feast, which she herself cooked. When Maharaj had enjoyed the dinner, he turned to her grandson and said, tell your grandmother to dream more often. On another occasion, a devotee came to take Maharaj to his home in a Rolls-Royce car. Maharaj enjoyed the ride very much, and when it was over, he remarked, in the future my motto will be Rolls-Royce or walk. His love of gardening has been referred to in an earlier chapter. At every monastery he visited, he gave valuable advice as to the laying out of gardens. Often he would gaze at the blossoming flowers and remark, look there, you see the worship of God in his universal form going on unceasingly. Many of his householder disciples came to Maharaj with them worldly troubles and problems. Not only did he listen to them sympathetically, but he also gave them constructive advice. Many successful professional men such as doctors, lawyers, engineers found it very easy to discuss the problems of their work with Maharaj. He would listen with intelligent interest and understanding, and was often able to offer a new suggestion or another angle of approach to the problem. Even though he was interested in everything and in all the events of his time, his intimate disciples could see that beneath this apparent interest, Maharaj always remained completely detached. The things of this world rolled off him like drops of water off a lotus leaf. So I will end this video here. Dear friends, you may be thinking why I am narrating the life story of Swami Brahmananda. Because life story of a sage, if we listen carefully, this will make our belief in divinity and God like concrete. So, dear friends, you must listen, read wherever you get the chance to know, read, or listen about the stories of sages, realized souls, enlightened sages. It will help you a lot. It will create interest. It will increase your spiritual level. So thank you, my dear friends, for listening this video with patience. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar. Namaskar.